Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into duality.
Absolutely. Always fascinated by this concept.
Yeah, today we're going to explore how this idea of like two opposing forces shapes how we understand reality, like across the board.
Across the board, totally. So we're talking philosophy, physics, even mythology.
Exactly, a lot to cover.
A lot to cover.
Our main source is this new book called Two, Being Both.
Very interesting book.
It's co-authored by, get this, an independent researcher and an AI learning module named Astra.
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
And we'll also be pulling in some extra stuff on dualism, just to round things out.
For sure. Good context.
So get ready for some big questions.
Oh, yeah. Always a good thing.
Like, is duality a fundamental truth about the universe?
Hmm.
Or just a way our brains, try to make sense of all this complexity?
Like brain work a model.
Yeah, exactly. And are we truly separate beings running around?
Right.
Or are we all like interconnected in ways we can't even grasp?
Deep stuff.
We're going to be looking at some pretty surprising examples along the way, like the whole shadow self idea from psychology.
Oh, Jung. Yeah, fascinating.
And even things like the Mandela effect. You familiar with that?
Oh, yeah, that's a weird one.
And then the really, really mind-bending stuff, like what quantum entanglement implies.
It's all connected. That's the thing. It's wild.
It is wild. It is wild. So, when you think about it,
Yeah.
duality, it's not just some like philosophical concept. It's like woven into the fabric of existence itself.
Exactly. Like even the most basic relationship we can think of, space and form.
Base and form, right? One can't exist without the other.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, philosophers from like Plato to Descartes, they've all wrestled with this.
They have.
Does space exist on its own, or is it like defined by the stuff, the objects within it?
It's like asking, if a tree falls in the forest
Right.
and no one's there, does it make a sound?
Yeah. Does space even exist if there's nothing to take it up?
Right, to occupy it.
Right, to occupy it.
I mean, is it even there?
Well, this is where being both comes in. They have this really cool concept they call form-induced dualism.
Form-induced dualism.
And it basically suggests that when something comes into existence, when a form takes shape,
Yeah.
it creates like a division, a separation.
Like a split.
Yeah, a split between what is and what isn't.
Okay, I think I'm following. So, like, before something exists, there's only potential, right?
Pure potential.
Like, it's like that blank canvas you were talking about.
Yeah, the artist's canvas, full of possibilities.
But then, boom, that first stroke of paint.
There it is.
A form emerges.
And now you've got a defined space.
A defined space, right, within that void.
Exactly.
So, like, the act of creation itself
Yeah.
is kind of like a fundamental act of duality.
I'd say so. And you see it everywhere, not just in art.
Oh, yeah.
Think about biology, right?
Biology,
The sperm and egg, they unite to form a new life.
That's a pretty fundamental duality.
Or the two strands of DNA holding the code of life right there.
Wow.
Even the tension between, life and death within every organism.
Huh, yeah. That's definitely there. It's amazing to think about this duality concept. It's literally woven into the blueprint of life itself.
It is. It is. It's not some abstract idea floating around. It's shaping the world in a very real way.
In very real ways.
And it goes even deeper than that, actually. The authors of Two, being both, they go into this mathematical system they call NUMO.
NUMO. Okay, what's that about?
So NUMO, it identifies these pairs of numbers.
Pairs of numbers, okay.
Like 0, 1, 25, 38. And they believe these pairs, they actually represent like these fundamental dualities.
So like specific number pairs, they're linked to universal dualities.
That's the idea.
Can you give me an example? I'm having a hard time picturing that.
Sure. So let's take the pair 25.
25, all right.
In their system, this represents the duality of balance and transformation.
Balance and transformation.
Right. So the number 2, that's associated with, harmony and stability.
Makes sense, yeah.
But then 5, that represents change and movement.
Oh, okay.
So you have these two opposing forces, but they're linked together.
Right, like yin and yang.
Exactly, that balance of opposing forces.
So how does NUMO, like this mathematical concept,
Yeah.
how does that like fit into this whole big picture of duality?
Well, the authors argue that it actually reveals the underlying structure of duality itself.
Okay.
It shows how these opposing forces, they're not just random. They're interconnected. They're woven into the fabric of, well, everything, even mathematics.
Okay, so we're seeing this duality pop up everywhere.
Yeah.
From the beginning of the universe to the building blocks of life, even in math now.
Yeah.
But how does this play out in like the real world? Like how does this duality affect, how things actually work, how we behave?
That is the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've been talking theory.
Yeah, but how does this actually manifest in our lives?
Right, right. Let's move from the theoretical to the practical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What kind of real-world examples can we point to?
What kind of real-world examples? Yeah.
Well, a great place to start is with reproduction.
Reproduction, okay.
There are these two contrasting strategies we see in nature.
Mm-hmm.
You've got asexual reproduction, which is all about like speed and efficiency.
All right.
Organisms essentially just clone themselves.
So lots of offspring really quickly,
Exactly.
but maybe not very adaptable.
Exactly. That's the trade-off. Asexual reproduction lacks that adaptability.
Okay.
So if the environment changes, if there's a new predator on the scene,
Yeah,
the entire population is vulnerable.
because they're all the same.
Genetically identical, yeah.
So there's a trade-off. Speed and efficiency, but you lose that resilience.
You got it.
What about sexual reproduction?
Ah, now that's where things get interesting.
How does that contrast in terms of, duality? So sexual reproduction, it's a more complex process, right? More energy intensive.
Right.
But it introduces this critical element, genetic diversity.
Okay.
By mixing genes, you get a population that's much better equipped to handle change, to survive challenges.
So diversity becomes like a survival strategy.
You could say that. It's like nature's way of hedging its bets.
Hedging its bets. I like that.
Yeah.
So introducing this element of duality into the process,
Yeah,
it makes life more resilient.
precisely. And this connects directly to your own life, too.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. How does this tension between stability and adaptability play out for you?
Good question.
In your work, your relationships, even your personal growth?
Yeah.
Are there times when you need to, embrace change to really thrive?
That's a great point. I mean, I like my routines. I like things to be predictable,
Sure.
but I've definitely learned that sometimes the best things happen when I step outside that comfort zone.
Absolutely. It's a balance, isn't it?
It is. It is. And you mentioned another biological example, the microbiome.
Oh, yeah. The microbiome. That's a fascinating one.
Can you tell me more about that?
So we're talking about trillions of microorganisms.
Trillions.
Yeah, living inside our bodies.
Wow.
And some are beneficial, some not so much.
Ah.
So there's this constant, tug of war going on, cooperation and competition happening at a microscopic level right inside us.
It's incredible. It's like we're these walking ecosystems constantly balancing these opposing forces.
That's a great way to put it. We're more than just individuals, you see.
We are.
Yeah.
So we've seen duality play out in the natural world, from how life reproduces to these tiny communities living inside us.
Right.
But what about our minds? Does this duality concept extend to our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the most fascinating examples comes from the work of Carl Jung,
Carl Jung, the psychologist.
the one and only, and his concept of the shadow self.
Ah, the shadow self, yeah. The part of us we try to hide, those traits we don't want to admit to.
Exactly. So how does this connect to duality, you ask?
Yeah, how does it?
Well, Jung believed that we all have this unconscious part of ourselves, and this part, it holds all the stuff we deem unacceptable, the stuff we reject, repress.
That's like our dark side.
In a way, yeah, but it's not about good versus evil, you see. It's about recognizing that to be whole, we need to integrate all parts of ourselves,
Even the messy bits.
especially the messy bits.
So instead of trying to, ignore our shadow self, we should try to understand it.
Exactly. Integrate it. It's a journey.
A journey, wow. And that process of integration, that's duality in action, right?
Absolutely. It's not about eliminating one side or the other. It's about finding that balance, bringing those opposing forces into harmony.
To create a more, complete self.
More complete, authentic self.
This is fascinating. So we've got duality in the physical world, in our biology, and now even in our minds, our personalities.
It's everywhere you look once you start to see it.
But what happens when we look at the most mind-bending realm of all? Quantum physics. Does duality still hold up at that level?
Oh, that's where things get really interesting. Duality doesn't disappear. It just takes on a whole new dimension. And that's where we're headed next.
All right, let's jump into this quantum realm. Where do we even begin?
Well, we could start with one of the most, I guess you could say, mind-boggling phenomena in quantum physics.
Okay, lay it on me.
Quantum entanglement.
Oh, yeah, that's the one Einstein called, what was it, spooky action at a distance.
That's the one.
What's so spooky about it, and how does it connect to duality?
So picture this. You have these two particles, right? And they're linked, but in a way that even when they're separated by huge distances...
Huge, like how huge are we talking?
Light years even.
Light years, wow.
They can still, like, instantly influence each other's state.
No way, so it's like they're connected by like an invisible thread or something.
That's the idea of, like, something's going on that we don't fully understand.
Something that goes beyond space and time, right?
Beyond space and time, exactly.
Okay, that's pretty wild.
It is.
So they're both separate and connected at the same time.
It seems paradoxical, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of breaks my brain a little bit.
Well, it's one of the reasons why quantum entanglement has puzzled scientists and philosophers for, well, decades.
Yeah, no kidding.
But for our discussion, what's really fascinating is that this entanglement, it really challenges this idea of separation, you know?
The separation we think is so fundamental.
Yeah, it suggests that there's this, like, deeper level of unity.
A deeper level of unity.
Underneath all these things that we think of as, you know, these individual objects.
So maybe we're all connected in ways we just can't even grasp.
It's a possibility.
It makes you wonder, you know, if those particles can be separate and connected, could we be too?
That's the question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Physicists, philosophers, they're all wrestling with it.
I mean, it really challenges what it means to be an individual, doesn't it?
It does. If we're all fundamentally interconnected, then those boundaries we think of.
Between ourselves and the world.
Yeah, maybe they're not as solid as we think.
It's kind of like those optical illusions, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Where you can see two different images in the same picture.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like, depending on how you look at it, could it be that we're seeing the world through this lens of duality, when in reality, everything's interconnected?
That's a great analogy. It really fits.
Right.
I mean, quantum entanglement, it forces us to really question, like, the nature of reality itself. What if what we experience as this solid world, this objective world?
What if it's just one way of seeing things?
Exactly. What if there's a much more complex reality?
A more complex and interconnected reality.
And that we just can't see it all.
Whoa, are you saying we could be living in a simulation?
Not necessarily the Matrix, but the idea that reality might not be what it seems, you know?
Right.
That's something that some physicists are taking very seriously these days.
Wow.
There are these interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the many worlds interpretation.
Many worlds interpretation, I've heard of that, yeah.
It suggests that every choice we make, every possibility...
Creates a split.
Creates a split, yeah. It branches off into a separate reality.
So there could be, like, infinite versions of me out there, living out every possible choice I could have made.
That's the idea.
Whoa, that's both exciting and terrifying.
It's a head trip, for sure.
I mean, what are all those other me's doing right now?
You know, living their best lives, hopefully.
Maybe.
But it's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, the many worlds interpretation, it takes the concept of duality to a whole new level.
So instead of just two opposing forces,
We're talking about, like, a multitude of realities.
branching off at every decision point.
Yeah, every time we make a choice, the universe splits.
But if every possibility exists in some reality,
Yeah.
does that mean that the concept of opposites, like of duality, does that even still make sense?
That's a great question. It really makes you think.
Right.
Is duality just a stepping stone, a way for us to try and grasp this reality?
This reality that's beyond our comprehension.
That's ultimately beyond our comprehension, yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. Entangled particles,
Yeah.
infinite reality.
And we're not done yet.
The possibility that our whole perception of reality is an illusion.
There's more.
Are there any other examples of how this duality plays out in this quantum world?
Oh, yeah. There's another phenomenon that's really strange.
Okay, hit me with it.
It's called the Mandela effect.
Oh yeah, the Mandela effect. I've heard of that.
It's when large groups of people, they have the same but false memory.
Yeah, like they remember something that didn't actually happen.
Exactly.
Like the classic example, people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison.
Right. When in reality, he didn't.
He didn't.
And there are tons of other examples, too.
Oh, yeah.
Misremembered movie quotes, book titles, historical events, all sorts of stuff.
And what's weird is that these collective false memories, they're often very specific, right?
Very specific and consistent across different people.
So what's going on? Is this just like a quirk of how our brains work?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Or could it be, something more, like evidence of parallel universes
Some people think so.
colliding or something?
There's no easy answer, and that's what makes the Mandela effect so fascinating.
It's a real mystery.
Some theories suggest it's a psychological thing,
Like a glitch in the matrix of our minds.
Something like that.
Okay.
A quirk of how our memories are stored and retrieved.
All right.
Others say, hey, maybe it's evidence of parallel universes, like you said.
Bleeding into each other.
Or even, some say, the result of some kind of cosmic consciousness.
Whoa, that's a little out there.
That's influencing our perceptions.
But cosmic consciousness influencing our memories.
It's a wild idea.
It is. It's like the Mandela effect just blurs the lines even more.
Blurs lines between
Their internal reality and the world outside.
Yeah, and it makes you question, like, what is truth,
If we can't even trust our own memories,
It's a big question.
right, then what can we trust? I mean, what other tools do we have to understand the world around us? Our senses,
Maybe,
logic,
perhaps,
scientific observation. I mean,
maybe we need a new kind of discernment,
a new way of seeing things
way to navigate this reality where truth itself
is more fluid.
might be more fluid and multifaceted than we ever imagined.
Okay, so we've explored duality from quantum entanglement, the cosmic scale,
Yeah.
to the Mandela effect, something very personal.
It's everywhere.
It seems like this concept, it really touches every aspect of our existence.
It does.
Is there a way to tie all of this together? Like, is there a unifying principle that helps us make sense of this whole dance of opposites?
I think there is, and it might surprise you. It's a concept we talked about earlier, Carl Jung's idea of the shadow self.
The shadow self,
It might be the key to understanding not just our own minds.
but the nature of reality itself.
It's a big claim, but hear me out.
Right, I'm listening.
We've talked about the shadow self as this hidden part of ourselves, the part we deny or repress.
Yeah.
But how does this connect to the bigger picture of duality? That's the question.
That's the question, yeah.
So Jung, he believed that the shadow self isn't something to be feared or avoided,
Okay.
but integrated.
Integrated into our conscious awareness.
Yeah, he saw it as like a mirror image
A mirror image of
our conscious personality representing the parts of ourselves we just don't like,
the parts we deem unacceptable.
the stuff we reject. Yeah.
It's like the dark side of the moon, right?
Mhm.
Always there, but hidden from view.
A good analogy.
But you're saying that by confronting this shadow, by integrating it,
We can become more whole.
more whole, more complete.
That's the idea.
And this process, this journey of facing our shadow and accepting it,
It's duality in action.
it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not trying to get rid of one side of ourselves,
No.
but we're trying to bring them together.
Finding that balance.
Create this integrated whole.
A more complete self.
This brings us back to balance and transformation.
It does, doesn't it?
It seems like integrating our shadow self isn't about becoming someone different,
Right.
but more about embracing all of who we are,
The good, the bad, the light, the dark.
embracing it all.
It's all part of the journey.
And this process, this embracing of both our light and dark sides,
It might just hold the key
to understanding reality.
to understanding how to navigate this paradoxical nature of reality itself. Yeah.
So by finding unity within ourselves,
We might start to see.
we start to see that unity in everything around us.
That's the hope.
Wow, that's a powerful idea.
It is.
So we've gone from the vastness of quantum entanglement
Right.
to the very personal depths of our own psyches.
A long journey.
What's the next step in this exploration of duality?
Well, the next step is to consider something that challenges the very foundation of duality itself.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
It's called monism.
Monism. So after all this deep dive into duality, now we're saying it might all be an illusion. My head's spinning a little bit, I gotta admit.
I know, right? It's a pretty radical concept. But it's been around for a while. Like, mystics and philosophers have explored this for centuries.
Really?
Yeah, monism, it proposes that beneath all this apparent duality, the opposites, the separation we see,
Yeah.
there's a deeper unity, like a fundamental oneness.
A oneness that connects Everything.
Everything, yeah.
So are you saying that everything we've been talking about, the interplay of opposites, the shadow self, even quantum entanglement,
Yeah.
it's all just like a trick of the mind?
It's not so much a trick, but maybe a limited perspective.
Okay. But if everything is ultimately one, then why do we experience this separation so strongly? I mean, it feels so real.
Yeah. Think about it like this. You look at a tree, right?
Yeah, a tree.
You see the trunk, the branches, the leaves, all these separate parts.
Right.
But underneath, there's this vast, interconnected root system that unites the whole thing.
Okay, so the separation, it's real on one level, but it's not the whole story.
Exactly. There's this deeper connection we might not be aware of.
The hidden unity.
Yeah, and this idea, it's not just for trees. It applies to reality itself.
Wow.
Ancient traditions like Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism, Zen Buddhism,
Yeah.
they teach that this division we see between self and world, subject and object,
Right.
it's an illusion created by the mind.
Our minds create these boundaries, these categories.
Can make sense of the world, yeah. But those distinctions, they might not reflect the true nature of reality.
It makes sense. I mean, we need to differentiate ourselves from everything else
Right. To function.
to function in the world. But if this sense of separation is just a mental construct, how do we reconcile that with our everyday experience? It still feels so real.
Think of it like a map.
Okay, a map.
You use it to understand the terrain, to plan a route, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
But the map isn't the terrain itself. It's a representation, a simplification.
So duality is like that map.
It's a mental framework. It helps us understand this reality.
This reality that's too complex for us to fully grasp.
Exactly.
So duality is a necessary illusion.
It's not that it's, like, wrong or bad. It's just a limited perspective.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
The challenge is, how do we recognize it as such? How do we see through this illusion of separation without denying the reality of our experience?
That's a tough one. So
Yeah.
we're not trying to get rid of duality, but we're trying to see the unity that's behind it.
That's it. Appreciate the diversity, the uniqueness of all these forms, but recognize that underlying connection.
That's a pretty challenging concept to wrap my head around. Is there any advice on how we can shift our perspective, like from duality to the sense of unity?
It's not about erasing duality. It's about recognizing its limits.
Its limits, yeah.
Acknowledge the interconnectedness of everything while still, appreciating the beauty and diversity. Practices like meditation can help. Being mindful, spending time in nature.
So it's about holding those two ideas in mind at the same time,
Yeah.
recognizing the oneness, but still appreciating the individual expression.
Exactly. That's the essence of transcending duality. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about holding both. Intention.
Seeing the unity and the diversity, the connection within the separation.
You got it.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've explored duality from the cosmic scale to the very personal, ancient myths, cutting-edge science. It's all connected.
It is, isn't it?
What's the key takeaway for our listeners? How can they apply these ideas to their own lives?
The most important thing to remember is this. It's not just an intellectual exercise. Duality is a living force. It shapes our experience every day.
It does.
By being more aware of this interplay of opposites, we can learn to navigate the world with more wisdom, more compassion.
More wisdom, more compassion, yeah.
We start to see the connections between things that seem totally separate. We appreciate the beauty in contrast, and we recognize that even in the midst of division, there's this deeper unity that binds us all.
It's like by embracing this paradox, by learning to dance with duality, we can create a world that reflects that deeper harmony.
That's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah, a world where separation isn't a threat, but an invitation to understand, to connect more deeply.
Beautifully said. That's the beauty of being human. We have this capacity to hold both the individual and the collective, the separate and the connected.
And through that expanded awareness,
Yeah.
we can create a more harmonious world.
For ourselves and for generations to come.
Well, there you have it, folks. We've explored this incredible world of duality, from tiny particles to the vastness of the cosmos. And it turns out, reality might be even more wondrous, more interconnected than we ever imagined.
It's a pretty amazing universe we live in.
It is. It is. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep embracing this dance of opposites. And until next time, happy deep diving.